so cool.
Start now.
Oh yes.
Coolest
if
guy
only.
here.
Yeah. No. They know way more than I do.
For sure, but I mean, like,
Not about music.
That's maybe true. That is
there.
maybe true. That is maybe true. That's good time.
Okay. I want to ask you about
Sure.
Anthony Rapp. He said he wanted to show up his singing in second season. Are you up for writing some
Well,
original music for
That's
him?
it. You know, here's the funny thing about Anthony. So I met him at the premiere. So we've met once. We sort of became Twitter buddies. You know, like I tweet to him, he tweet to me, which is kind of fun. You know, that's sort of, to me, that's sort of the point of Twitter.
Exactly, conversation.
Yeah, just conversation. I've been a fan of Anthony Rapp since he was in Adventures in Babysitting, right? So when I was a kid, I was a teenager, and I think we're relatively close in age. And then Rent, I'm just a fan. So if he called me and said, I want to sing a song, I will figure something out. I will figure it out.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
feel free.
You got nothing? Okay. Let's see what Anthony
Where
wants
did
to
your love of Star Wars start?
Well, it's Star Trek. But and I'm not the one who would get mad at that, because somebody else just asked me, like, so what, Star Wars, Star Trek? I'm like, can't we just love it, all of it? I love Star Wars and Star Trek. It began at The Next Generation when I was a teenager, and I sort of went in there and then went backwards to the original series and the movies of the 80s, so like the original motion picture, and then Wrath of Khan, which happens to be my favorite, and Search for Spock and the later ones. So once I got into there, I became sort of a lifelong Trekkie.
Okay, well, so what's more of an inspiration, the militaristic score of James Horner or the operaticness of Goldsmith?
Well, so we talk about this as well. I was not a huge fan of the original motion picture as a movie. I love the score. I love the score. I'm a huge Goldsmith fan to begin with, like Chinatown. Like he's a giant among giants. That score, which led to the theme for The Next Generation, was a really big deal. But to me, my favorite score is Horner's score. Okay. And not on its own as a piece of music, but as a score for the movie, and that it made the most sense to me. So I go back to that. It's on my iPhone. I listen to that, not for inspiration for us, because we have a different type of score altogether, but for just the love of music. So but I would say, yeah, I don't know that I would call it militaristic, though. I mean, there's a militaristic aspect to it, but it had an off-kilter sense to it that I really thought tracked with Khan. And that, to me, I'm the kind of person who loves to write for character, and I love to write for emotional content, rather than action sequences are fun to write, and I had to do that on this in this show. But I'm always trying to find a character center or an emotional center or some sort of heart in what I'm doing, or else it doesn't make any sense to me.
So do you think that the style of music in season 2 will change? Because the tone of the story will change as the war's over?
I don't know that the style will change. I mean, here one of the hardest parts about writing the score for this show is trying to create a unique identity for us musically, and yet still have it feel and sound familiar, because it's a franchise, it's a thing. Star Trek is a thing. So I didn't, if you go too close on one direction, you're copycatting, and if you go too far in the other direction, then you're not doing Star Trek. So it's a really sort of fine line to walk. And I don't think that we need to change in terms of the style. I think that what will change is how the characters are interacting, and I just follow the story. I don't know that that's a tonal shift. I think that, yeah, I probably won't have dark action sequences like when Starfleet was being annihilated by the Klingons, because that apparently that's not a part of what we're telling in season 2, although I don't know what we're telling in season 2. You may have way more information than I do, having just sat with the writers.
When do you expect to start working on season 2? If they're starting filming next month, then when do you get what you need to start scoring?
Aaron told me I should get a first script in a week or so, which means I'll probably start sketching some ideas if I need to sketch ideas sometime in May, I guess. The real question will be like, how do we make the transition from 15 to 1? You know, from episode 15 to episode 1, like, what's that transition going to be like? It may be a slighter transition in that episode transition than it is in, say, episode 2 and 3 to 4 and 5 as we transition away from the last season. You know, what we know is we've got the Discovery and we've got the Enterprise sitting there. So I know I have to do something with that, right? And I know that's going to be where we pick up because that's where we left off.
Right.
So that transition will be somewhat similar, I think. Where that leads me, if I knew, I couldn't tell you, but I don't know.
So what kind of discussions did you guys have before the show started about like what kind of tone and vibe for the music?
When I first sat with Aaron and Gretchen, we talked about wanting to have a unity in the score, and by unity we meant like in the universe, you know, a coming together of species and in this show about exploration, and wanting to reach into the characters' hearts and play to the emotional core, which I think is what separates us from some of the previous iterations of Star Trek, in that we tend to really focus on the interpersonal relationships and the character development as opposed to the development of only the story. And as a composer, I tend to want to write that kind of music, which I think is what drew me to the project, and what maybe drew the project to me was I tend to like to write emotionally charged music as opposed to only big action music or only militaristic music or dark music.
So John Wick isn't the project for you?
Maybe not, you know, maybe not. But I tend to want to write to what people are feeling, right, not what people are saying,
right,
or not what people are doing.
Shooting.
Right. And, you know, I guess my thought about that is even when you're shooting, you're still feeling. So why not play that as opposed to, oh my God, he's got a gun, or oh my God, he's got a phaser, or whatever. I think that's what I love about this show, is we tell those stories, and we tell the stories about people.
So what about the second half of season 1 soundtrack? When can we expect that to be available?
It's in a few weeks.
Soon?
Yeah.
Is there going to be vinyl?
So here's what's happening is we're releasing a volume 2 of a CD and a
I feel like I have
digitally.
half of the music.
You do. You have episodes 1 through 9.
Yeah.
So the music from episodes 10 through 15 will appear on a CD, a volume 2 CD, and then there will be a deluxe vinyl edition which will have music from chapter 1 and chapter 2.
Nice.
But it'll be selects because you can't fit it all onto 4.
So is there a date that they've given you? Or
so
just
I think the vinyl will come sometime in June, but I think that the digital version might come out in the next few weeks, and then the CD sometime right after that. All right.
No, I'm trying to formulate it. But no, I wanted to ask is sort of when you make those choices for a soundtrack, like what goes into the decision of that track list?
You know, how much coffee I had that day. I mean, there's really no. It just is what was the one that I was liking on that day. There's so much music. I gave Aaron and Gretchen bound copies of the score for the entire season, and there were 2 books that were this thick and like this big. There was so much music because we do about 36 minutes of music an episode that it would be impossible to put it all on. Right. So I sort of chose the themes that I really loved and the themes that were really important to me. And I think that, you know, in general, like I get the occasional email like, why didn't you put this piece on? It's like, well, I can't, because I can't put everything on.
Right. Yeah.
I can't. And it sort of dilutes the listening experience. I mean, I come from making albums. I was in a band for 25 years or whatever, made a bunch of albums. And making an album and listening to an album is an experience. I mean, at least the way I used to love listening to records. And, I used to put on headphones and listen to Pink Floyd all day long. And those records had 9 songs on them,
Right.
5 on one side and 4 on the other. So I don't go that far, but I think like putting the right amount of music on a CD or in a soundtrack is important.
What was the name of the band?
Tonic is the name of my band from the 90s. We were a 90s alternative rock outfit.
Tonic, just what we knew.
Yes, that is sort of where we got the name, but not really.
So, what about like the opening theme?
Yeah.
For season 2, will there be anything changed?
I don't
in
think
it
so.
To give season 2 a different.
I don't think
flavor?
so. I think that I have to talk to them about whether or not they want me to reimagine the theme, but I don't see why we would do that unless there's such a shift that they want to change the theme of the show.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody has said anything to me about that. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that I don't have to do that. That was not easy.
It's pretty successful, I have to say. That theme, it's definitely lodged itself into my head.
I think that you can't make everybody happy, and there, especially with Star Trek, and more than just Star Trek, any sort of iconic franchise, sci-fi franchise, even more, fandom is pretty rabid. So there's some people who are like, this, I don't like that, and then there's some people who are like, love it. You can't. You gotta just do what you do. There's gonna be haters, there's gonna be lovers, there's gonna be losers, there's gonna be winners, right? So, I feel like I think that the theme really does represent what the show is, and I think in that way the theme is successful, and that's all I can hope for. Like my idea for what the theme could be and what it means musically to me, and how that relates to what we were originally talking about, what the show was, works for me, and so I think in that way it feels like it was successful.
And since a lot of Star Trek shows kind of pretend that music stops at the point at which public domain ends, right? Are you ever tempted to kind of project what pop music would sound like 250 years on?
We've had this conversation. I had this conversation with them because in episode 7, the Mud episode, we used Wyclef Jean or something. And, really, like, I don't know, I mean, 200 years later, I'm listening to Bach, right? So what is it going to sound like then? I mean, they had me write an opera, right? So for episodes 12 and 13, there's the Caecilian opera that Stamets talks about. Culbert and Stamets have this thing. Stamets loves it, Culbert doesn't, but they had to hear it. We had to hear it. So I decided to not try to be a futuristic opera. I decided that opera is opera, right? So it's got to sound like a voice singing a thing with a thing, and I don't know. I'm always a little afraid to try to figure out what it's going to sound like 250 years from now or 300 years from now. So I'd say no.
I think that's wise, because visually we look at what did they imagine it would look like in the future, and now we look at it, we're like, oh, my phone is better than that, right?
So, well, have you seen the pictures of? So we've now caught up with Back to the Future. So Back to the Future 3, which ends up in the future, right, was 35 years past that, which we're now at or around, and. Nothing, not even close. We're not even close. Nobody's.
Where's my hoverboard?
Where's my hoverboard? Where's my flying car? Where are my self-tying shoes? No.
Yeah.
So I'm a little.
My car doesn't run on a banana.
No, that would be nice. Banana peel.
Yeah.
Would be even better. I'm not really. I'm a little reluctant to try to figure out what the future is. I leave that to the designers. They can figure that out. I'm just gonna write music that makes us feel good. Right.
I dig it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you so much.
welcome. You're welcome.
Good job.